you ever do is hold me back. You don't deserve to read your father's will. Tie him up! Drive him out of this village! He's not human anymore!
A slap can destroy a lifetime, but some truths cut even deeper.
This story reminds us that parents don't need us to be rich. They just need us to understand them. Don't wait until they're gone to realize how many hurtful words we once said. In this life, some truths, if learned early, can save a lifetime. But if learned too late, all that's left is regret. Call your parents. Hug them if you still can. Don't let love wait. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Every day, I share stories that help you reflect, slow down, and love a little more. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story. Trong Van Ho in Nigeria. The red dirt road leading into Umako village was still the same crooked, dusty, and blazing hot under the late afternoon sun. But the man stepping out of the shiny car was no longer the boy who once walked that path. His expensive shirt, polished leather shoes, and cold metallic watch reflected a kind of light that didn't belong to this place. And yet, even that polished exterior couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. Beneath the surface of success was a frustration boiling like fire. Tund, once known throughout the village as the gentle, well-mannered son, had returned with a heart full of wounds. 3 days ago, he was fired from his company in Lagos. A tiny mistake in a report, a cold look from his manager, and then everything collapsed. His rented apartment was locked, his co-workers looked away, and his future shattered like a glass cup hitting the stone floor. Tund couldn't accept it. He needed someone to blame. Someone weaker, someone easier to point a finger at. And in a moment of blind anger, the first name that flashed in his mind was his mother. He had always believed his parents were too old-fashioned, too village-minded, too clueless about building a future. He had left this place with a silent vow. One day, I'll prove they were wrong. And he did rise, at least on the outside, until the company doors slammed shut on him. Now as the car stopped in front of the clay brick house, Tund took a long breath, trying to swallow the bitterness inside him, but the anger refused to die. The laughter of children nearby, the smell of wood smoke, the clucking of chickens, everything about the village only reminded him of the low beginnings he had fought so hard to escape. The door opened. His mother, Mama Aduk, walked out slowly. She had aged since he last saw her. Her back was slightly bent, her hair more gray than black, but her smile was exactly as it had been when he was a boy, gentle, warm, and full of pride for her son. "Tund, you're home?" Her voice trembled joy, relief, and a mother's endless love all mixed together, as if just seeing her son alive was enough to add years to her life. But Tund stared at her with cold eyes. He didn't run to hug her like sons who return from the city. He didn't bow, didn't smile. Instead, he stood stiff, hands in his pockets, face twisted as if he were forced to be here by a cruel fate. Mama Aduk still stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "You've lost weight. You must have been struggling lately." Tund scoffed. Struggling? Struggling because of who? Because of the poor background he had to rise from. Because he didn't attend an international school like other children. Because his youth was full of lack, making him feel he started life slower than everyone else. All those resentments he gathered and threw them at the mother standing before him. "I'm fine," he said curtly, eyes looking away. "I worry about you every day. I pray for you." "That's enough, Mother." The words were sharp as a knife. Mama Aduk froze. Tund brushed past her and walked inside, looking around as if inspecting a neglected, unfamiliar house. Cracked clay walls, an old wooden table, a sun-faded curtain. Everything made him think again. If they had let me attend that boarding school years ago, I wouldn't be suffering like this. Outside, his mother still stood in place. Her smile had faded. Her hands trembled as they touched the hem of her old wrapper. She didn't understand what was happening in her son's heart. She only knew this: he was back, but not as the boy she raised with calloused hands and countless nights of skipped dinners to save for his school fees. Inside the house, Tun dropped his suitcase on the table and snapped it open. The sound echoed through the quiet room. He laid out the documents the company had returned to him and let out a long, heavy breath. The anger rose again inside him like a wild animal that had finally found its escape. Then, from the yard, his mother's voice drifted in, soft, caring, and genuine, just like always. "Have you eaten, my son? I made yam soup for you." That voice, once the warmth of his entire childhood, now made his blood boil. He felt like a failure. And the most terrifying part was this: he was searching for someone to blame, someone who could carry the weight of his broken pride. Tun's fists tightened. A vein pulsed in his forehead. His eyes burned red. And inside his chest, a dark thought began to form, a thought that would lead to a tragedy the entire village would speak of for years to come. The sun was sinking behind the red clay rooftops, leaving a melancholic golden haze across the yard. The smell of wood smoke slipped through the doorway, mixing with the scent of vegetables in the woven basket Mama Aduk was holding. The moment she heard her son had returned, she rushed out of the kitchen, her worn-out slippers slapping against the ground, each step as hurried as a child afraid to miss a gift. "Tund, But her greeting froze before leaving her lips. Tund stood in the middle of the yard, his shadow stretched long across the dirt, yet colder than stone. He didn't look at her like a son returning after years away. He looked at her like an obstacle, like a door he needed to break through. His voice cut through the quiet, raw, and emotionless. "Stay out of my life, Mother." The basket slipped from Mama Aduk's hands and fell to the ground. The morning fresh vegetable leaves scattered around her feet. She blinked rapidly, thinking she must have misheard. "Son, what did you say?" "Tund, you've been on the road for hours. Come inside and rest." But he cut her off, voice sharp like a hammer striking stone. "I'm here for the land deed. I need money to go back to the city." Silence thickened between them. A gust of wind swept through, carrying a few old mango leaves across the yard. Mama Aduk stood still, as though all strength had drained from her body. It wasn't the request for the land that hurt her, it was the way he said it. Cold, hard, nothing like the Tund she once knew. "Tund." Her voice trembled, quiet and careful, as if she feared provoking him further. "That land was your father's. It means something to this family. Please, think about it." But Tund laughed a joyless, bitter sound. His eyes burned with exhaustion, resentment, and disappointment. "Mean something?" he shouted. "Mean what? A pile of dry dirt? Did it feed me when I was young? Did it let me study like other kids? Did it help me escape this village?" She stepped back slightly, her hand trembling. "Your father? He did everything he could. He left us with debt, didn't he?" The shout tore through the quiet evening like a blade. Neighbors nearby stopped mid-step, exchanging uneasy glances. Tund, once the most polite child in the village, was now. Mama Aduk bit her lip, trying to steady her breaking voice. "Tund, you never spoke about your father like this. Because I didn't want to hurt you," he snapped. "But you want the truth? Fine, I'll say it. He died and left me with nothing but a childhood full of lack. I had to stitch together my future on my own. I survived in Lagos because people pitied me. I worked myself into the ground just to stay afloat. What did he do for that? Nothing. He left a piece of land, some useless land nobody wants, unless I find someone to buy it." Mama Aduk's whole body trembled. Not because she was angry, but because she was hurting. This was the first time she had heard her son speak his heart out, and the words came laced with venom. She knew city life was harsh, but she never imagined it had twisted her son into the man standing before her, a man hidden behind thorny walls, built from years of pain. "You truly believe that?" A small question, but it carried her entire heart. Tund turned away from her gaze. Inside him, something was burning, but the fire didn't warm him. It was eating him alive. He didn't want to think about his father. He didn't want to remember those rainy nights when his father held him tight to keep him warm in their leaking house. Or the mornings his father carried bundles of firewood to the market just to earn enough for his notebooks. He pushed every memory away as though they were shards of glass slicing through him. "I need the money," he repeated, voice low and heavy. "Give me the land deed and I'll leave. I don't want to stay here." Mama Aduk bent down to pick up the basket, now covered in dust just like her heart, pressed down onto the yard floor, dirty, aching, and unbearably heavy. Holding the basket to her chest, she looked at her son with eyes brimming with tears that refused to fall. "I'm not stopping you from leaving," she whispered, voice as soft as wind brushing the eaves. "But I beg you, don't turn your father into a worthless man in your memories. He lived his entire life for you." Tund clenched his jaw. "You always defend him, because I know the truth." She gripped the basket tighter, her fingers turning pale. "Tund, listen. Before he died, your father said that as long as you could get an education, he would gladly give his life." "Enough, mother," Tund roared, his face flushing red. The pain inside him was screaming, but he mistook that scream for fury. He stepped forward, his shadow swallowing her small, fragile frame. A rooster crowed in the distance. The wind shifted. The world seemed to hold its breath. Mama Aduk looked deep into his eyes, and for the first time, she no longer saw the boy she raised. She saw a wounded man, protecting himself by hurting others. "Tund," she said his name one last time, soft as a prayer. But his heart was too loud to hear. The air on that red dirt road felt heavy that day, thick, like a storm cloud about to burst open. The wind stopped. The birds went silent. Neighbors stood scattered near the gate, each still holding something, a bundle of firewood, a bucket of water, a metal pail, but their eyes were glued to the mother and son facing each other in the middle of the clay yard. Tund was breathing hard, chest rising and falling with years of buried anger. His eyes no longer held the softness of a village boy. They were the eyes of a man torn apart by life, desperately searching for someone to blame. And tragically, he chose his mother. Mama Aduk stood a few steps away, still holding the vegetable basket to her chest like a flimsy shield in a raging storm. Her face was tired, but she still carried the calm of a mother who had spent her whole life absorbing pain just to keep peace in her home. But today, that peace shattered. Tund exploded, his voice carrying a decade of bitterness. "You were always poor, always holding me back." His shout ripped across the yard, bouncing off the clay walls, soaring over thatched roofs, racing down the endless red road. A few children playing nearby screamed and ran to their mothers. An elderly woman near the village gate clutched her headscarf tightly. Mama Aduk shook her head, eyes shimmering with tears. "Tund, I never held you back. I only—" She didn't finish. Slap! The sound cracked through the air so sharply that the birds resting in the mango tree above exploded into flight. It was a chilling sound like a whip slicing through the dry, brittle air. Mama Aduk fell hard onto the red earth. Her basket rolled from her hands, its lid popping open. Vegetable leaves scattered across the ground like pieces of torn memories. And then, from the pocket of her old wrapper, a yellowed piece of paper slipped out, drifting gently down until it landed right at Tund's feet. The entire village froze. No one dared breathe. No one moved. No one could believe that the gentle boy they once knew had just struck his own mother. An elderly man whispered, voice trembling, "Dear heavens, what has he done?" Another man clenched his jaw. Has Tund lost his mind? The air in the yard turned solid. Every sound was swallowed. Only Tund's ragged breathing and the rustling of dry mango leaves filled the fading light. Mama Aduk lay on her side, hair messy, hand trembling as she pushed against the ground, trying to sit up. Blood stained her lip. A deep red handprint burned across her cheek, a mark she would remember long after the pain faded. But the deepest wound, wasn't on her skin. It was in her eyes, the shattered look of a mother staring at the child she had raised with every ounce of love she had. "Tund." Her voice cracked, thin and fragile. What have you done?" But Tund didn't answer. He stood frozen, as if he too couldn't comprehend the explosion that had just erupted from within him. His fist trembled, not from anger anymore, but from shock. His face drained of color as he stared at his mother on the ground. What had he done? A flicker of regret flashed in his eyes, but it was smothered instantly by pride. By the bitterness he carried back from the city. By the stubbornness choking his reason. Don't act like you're the victim," Tund stammered, trying and failing to steady his voice. You always push me. You always expect me to sacrifice." Mama Aduk didn't speak. She only looked at him. The look of someone so hurt, tears no longer even formed. Her eyes shifted to the piece of paper on the ground. The yellowed letter, folded neatly. One corner burnt, evidence of a night she must have sat by the fire, reading it until the edges wore thin. The neighbor closest to them whispered, "That looks like a letter from Adwale, his father." Tund frowned, bending down to pick it up, not yet understanding what it was. The paper was rough, brittle, carrying the scent of ashes and time. He opened it, just as a soft breeze made the edges tremble like a weary sigh. The faded ink spelled words written by a hand long gone. "If Tund is reading this letter, it means I am no longer here." Tund froze. The entire world around him went silent. Mama Aduk closed her eyes, tears spilling out at last. Tund continued reading, voice hoarse. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you the life other children had. But every bundle of firewood I carried, every bowl of food I skipped, every night I stayed awake, was so you could have a chance to fly farther than I ever dreamed." A long, crushing silence. Tund couldn't breathe. "If one day you succeed, remember this. Everything you have came from your mother's sacrifice. That woman starved so you could learn. Don't let her suffer. Protect her the way she has protected you." The letter slipped from Tund's hands. His fingers trembled so violently that it fell to the ground again. The yard held its breath. Only the sound of a mother's quiet sobs and a son's broken breathing remained as he finally confronted the truth he had spent his whole life refusing to see. The evening wind grew stronger, whipping up the red dirt into swirling little spirals like wandering spirits witnessing the tragedy unfolding in the old village yard. Mama Aduk, still shaking from the fall, stepped forward. Her legs wobbled with pain, but she forced herself toward the letter the wind threatened to carry away. Her fingers brushed the rough edge, and she clutched it to her chest, as if holding the heart of the man she once loved and lost. She lifted her eyes to Tund, her son, the child she loved enough to take every pain on his behalf. Her voice cracked, trembling as if it might break entirely. "Read it. This is your father's final wish." Tund was still breathing hard, anger, shame, and chaos storming inside him. But when she held the letter out to him, his hand reached forward almost against his will, pulled by something stronger than pride. He snatched the letter. His first instinct was to throw it away, to reject the past he had spent years trying to outrun. But then, his eyes froze. On the yellowed paper was his father's handwriting. Bold, deliberate strokes, every letter written as if his father had poured the last of his strength into it. This father, whom Tund had dismissed as useless, poor, a man who left nothing but hardship, suddenly stood before him again, alive in these ink strokes. Tund opened the letter with trembling hands, trembling from anger, from fear, and from something he could no longer ignore. The wind flipped a corner of the paper. The ink had faded, but every word still felt heavy with love. "My son, if one day you succeed, don't forget this. I sold the bull, your mother sold the land, and we sold our old home so you could go to school." Tund froze. The words pierced into him sharp, cold needles straight to the heart. He remembered being 10, when their only bull had suddenly disappeared. His father had said, the bull was getting old. Only now did he realize it had been sold to pay his school fees. He swallowed hard and continued reading. The path you walk may be difficult, but every step you take is built on your mother's sweat. The woman who stayed up countless nights mending your worn-out uniform. The woman who skipped meals so she could buy your books. Tund looked toward his mother. She stood there gripping her wrapper, her eyes filled not with judgment, but with worry and love. She didn't argue with him, didn't defend herself, didn't utter even a single word of blame. She only wanted him to understand, to finally see. But all this time he had been blind. He looked back at the letter. His father's handwriting seemed alive, speaking straight into his chest. If you ever feel alone in that big city, remember that your mother and father stand behind you, no matter how far or how poor we are. I don't need you to be greatly successful. I only need you to remember the family that shaped you into who you are. The letter shook in his hands, not just from the wind, but because he was trembling violently. Old memories flooded back like a dam breaking. His father walking him to school under the rain. His mother carrying him on her back during a fevered night. Dinners with only one piece of fish, and it always ended up in his bowl. Parent-teacher meetings where his father stood at the back, ashamed of his worn clothes. His mother watching him leave for school with eyes shining like she was staring at the sun. And he had called them poor, had said they held him back, had slapped his mother, the woman who had traded away her youth so he could have a future. Tund read on, each word twisting painfully inside him. Your success is the greatest pride of my life. But if one day you turn your back on your mother, then whether I am beneath the earth or above it, I will never be at peace. Tund's vision blurred. Tears he had suppressed for years, believing real men must never cry, finally spilled onto the page, soaking into every line his father left behind. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to say how sorry he was, to fall into his mother's arms, to undo everything. But the words wouldn't come. They lodged in his throat, choking him. "Father," he whispered through trembling breaths. I didn't know. I truly didn't know." His mother stepped closer, her cheek still marked with the bright red shape of his hand. She placed her palm gently on his shoulder, the warmth of it so soft, so familiar, it nearly brought him to his knees like a lost child finally found. "Tund," she murmured, "I never blamed you. And neither did your father." But Tund stepped back, pressing the letter to his chest. I hit you, Mother. I slapped you." His voice cracked, shattering like glass. The entire village stood frozen, watching. They had once seen Tund's rise in the city, but today, for the first time, they saw him break. Not because he lost a job, not because life defeated him, but because he had finally come face to face with the greatest truth of his life. The letter light as air, yet heavy as the sky, rested in his hands, like a verdict, like the tears of a father sent from beyond the grave. The evening wind seemed to halt. The mango leaves stopped trembling, as if all of nature was holding its breath while witnessing the scene before it. A son who once walked proudly through the glittering city now stood frozen in the village yard, his hands trembling around his father's letter. Tund looked down at his hands. Hands that once dreamed of reaching skyscrapers. Hands that drafted plans, signed contracts. But these same hands had struck the woman who gave him life. In that moment, his whole body felt weightless. A cold shock shot up his spine, tightening around his throat, stealing his breath. His lips quivered, his eyes widened, and truth crashed into him, a violent flood washing away every illusion he had held. He remembered the first time his father rode him to school on the old bicycle. The bicycle he once called embarrassing. He now realized his father had traded their last bull, their most valuable possession, to buy it. He remembered that morning clearly, his father smiling with missing teeth, eyes squinting in joy, patting him on the shoulder. My son must go to school properly. But back then, Tund didn't know his father had walked miles back from the market, just to be home in time for supper. Then he remembered the nights his mother sat by the dim kerosene lamp, patching every tear in his worn school uniform. Each stitch slow, careful, full of a mother's hope. She even embroidered his name on the pocket, so teachers wouldn't scold him for wearing old clothes. She would say, "So you'll look just like your classmates." No one will know this uniform has been mended 3 times, but he never thought of that. He only thought of escaping this village as soon as possible. Memories crashed harder, fierce and cutting. The meal so poor, there was only one small piece of fish. And every time, his mother claimed she had eaten already. But now he remembered. He had seen her in the kitchen stirring water into cold rice, swallowing it slowly. Then she would watch him eat, smiling with shining eyes, as if his full stomach filled her own. Pain tightened around his chest until he couldn't breathe. He stepped back. Then another step. The letter shook violently, not from wind, but from the tremor consuming his entire body. Tund lifted his eyes to his mother. She still stood there, her cheek marked with the burning red imprint of his palm. A living accusation, a whip across his heart. Tund. Her voice trembled, no anger, no blame, only fear for her son. That made the pain worse. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His breath snagged in his throat. His heart clenched painfully. Mother. Just saying one word made his lips sting, as if they were bleeding from holding back emotion. He stared at his hands again. These fingers had once been held gently as she led him across the small stream. Once guided by his father as he learned to write. Once soothed by both parents whenever he fell. And now, these same hands had knocked her to the ground. No. He whispered, shaking his head violently. I can't believe I did. Suddenly, his knees gave out. Tund collapsed onto the dirt. His knees hit the red earth with a crack so loud the villagers flinched. He leaned forward, palms pressed into the ground, chest heaving. His breath broke apart like a man who had run 100 miles. And then the tears began, not drop by drop, but like a dam bursting. He cried like a child lost from his mother. Cried as if his soul had been torn into pieces. Father, mother. I was wrong. His voice shattered. I was wrong. It wasn't the cry of a grown man. It was the broken sob of a child consumed by the weight of his own ambition. His mother stepped toward him slowly, cautiously, as if afraid he might run. Don't touch me. Tund choked, face close to the ground. I don't deserve it. Don't touch me. But Mama Aduk lowered herself beside him, kneeling, despite the pain still throbbing from her fall. She placed her trembling, fragile hand on his shoulder, warm, painfully warm. A warmth that only a mother carries. Tund's sobs erupted harder at that touch, that forgiveness. Mother, I was wrong. I'm not worthy of being your son. Her voice cracked. Tund, you could do the worst thing in the world, and I would still be your mother. Tund looked up, his eyes swollen, red, drowning in guilt. And there, in the middle of the village yard, before dozens of silent witnesses, he wrapped his arms around his mother's legs, weeping like a 5-year-old child. The entire village stood still. No one spoke. They no longer saw a proud city man. They saw a son collapsing under the truth, breaking apart because he realized he had hurt the most precious person he had. And in his hand, the letter from his father lay soaked with tears. In that moment, time seemed to stop. All the sounds of the village, chickens crowing, children laughing, the wind brushing through thatched roofs, fell silent. Only an unmoving space remained, where a broken son knelt in pieces, and a mother stood like a small flickering lamp in the storm of his life. Tund, eyes bloodshot and face soaked in tears, lunged toward his mother. His pride was gone. His anger washed away. His hardened city shell shattered completely. Only the desperate heartbeat of a child rediscovering the warmth he had lost remained. He collapsed before her, knees slamming into the red earth with a sharp, cracking sound. Dust clung to his pants, rose into the air, settled on his face, but he didn't care. He wrapped his arms tightly around his mother, so tight that Mama Aduk had to shift her weight to keep from falling. "Mother," his voice splintered like old wood breaking. "I was wrong. Please, don't leave me." Words he had never said in all his years in the city. Words buried under pride, pain, and ambition, now pouring out uncontrollably. Mama Aduk did not step back. She did not recoil in fear. She did not push him away in anger. She simply leaned down, slowly, painfully, lovingly, her trembling hand weathered by cold mornings, market days, and long nights waiting for her son, came to rest on his head. A soft touch, just one, and it broke him even further. "As long as you come home." Her voice was quiet, but it echoed through the entire yard. "I never once left you." A few women nearby lifted their scarves to wipe their eyes. An elderly man shook his head, murmuring, "A mother's love. Nothing on earth compares." Even the men, usually stoic, unflinching, turned away, hiding their reddened eyes. Not because they didn't want to watch, but because the sight was too raw, too painful, too beautiful. Tund clung to his mother, his tears soaking through her wrapper. His shoulders shook with uncontrollable sobs, as if he were purging years of hurt, rage, and misunderstanding. "Mother, I'm sorry," he choked out, again and again. "I didn't know. I only thought of myself. I didn't know what you endured." His mother lifted his face gently in her thin hands. There was no anger in her eyes, no resentment. Only a quiet, unbreakable peace, the kind forged from years of love and forgiveness. "Tund, my son." Her voice was like the first breeze before the rainy season, soft but powerful enough to make the heart tremble. No one is born knowing everything. Everyone who walks far can lose their way. "What matters is that you came back," Tund sobbed openly, not caring who watched. The eyes of the village meant nothing. All that mattered was her embrace. The earth beneath his knees began to darken with tears, forming deep, heavy-marked stains of guilt, but also the first signs of rebirth. Mama Aduk wiped his tears with slow, tender motions, as if soothing the deepest wound in his soul. "Stand up, my child," she whispered, not commanding, but inviting him to rise from the rubble of his own mistakes. "You are your father's son. You are not a bad man. You've just been hurting for too long." Tund shook his head desperately. "No, I don't deserve." "You do." She placed her hand over his heart. "You always have. You just forgot how deeply you are loved." A woman in the crowd suddenly broke into sobs, then another. And soon, all of Emeko stood in a silent circle, eyes glistening. They weren't just witnessing a man's collapse. They were witnessing a son's rebirth. A woman whispered softly, "His father must be crying in heaven." An old man replied, "No. He's smiling." The boy finally found his way back to the light. Tund held on to his mother for a long time, afraid that if he let go, he would lose his entire world again. He lowered his head and touched her worn, wrinkled hands to his forehead, then whispered like a solemn vow, "I will never leave you again. Never." A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the scent of earth, mango leaves, and a quiet peace that the house had been missing for years. There, surrounded by witnesses and bathed in the golden glow of dusk, a son returned home, not with a suitcase, not with a shiny car, but with a shattered heart finally beginning to heal. The next morning, the sun rose more slowly than usual, as if even the daylight wished to soften itself, afraid to disturb the fragile cracks still lingering inside the small house. A thin mist settled over the red earth, clinging to the old mango branches and to Mama Aduk's thin shoulders as she opened the door. In the kitchen, pots and pans clinked softly, not with the frantic rhythm of a mother rushing to care for her child, but with the gentle peace of a woman whose heart had finally been healed. Today, she was no longer standing alone. Out in the yard, Tund was carefully sweeping fallen leaves, not with the stiff, awkward posture of a city man forced to do a village chore, but with reverence, as if each sweep were brushing away a layer of guilt from his heart. Each stroke of the broom wiped away another piece of his old pride. Each breath of village air made him lighter, though the wounds in his heart had not fully healed. He paused when he noticed the old wooden chair beneath the mango tree. The chair where his father once sat, sharpening knives, repairing his mother's slippers, or telling him stories about life. It was faded now, worn by sun and rain, a little rotten in places, but still standing firm, like a father's quiet love. Tund sat down and gripped the letter he had pressed flat again the night before, his father's letter. The words that had shattered him, but also put him back together. He opened it and read it again, though he already knew every word by heart. Your success is your parents' pride. But never turn your back on your mother. His father's voice seemed to rise from the depths of memory. Each sentence felt written not just with ink, but with the man's entire life. Tund closed his eyes, letting the breeze wash over him, carrying the smell of earth and wood smoke, scents he once called poor and old-fashioned, but now filled him with a strange warmth. His mother stepped into the yard, holding a bowl of warm porridge. Tund, eat something, my child. He looked up, and a smile, a real smile, free of distance and resentment, rose on his face. Let me help you, he said as he stood to take the bowl. Just a simple sentence, but Mama Aduk covered her mouth to keep herself from sobbing. For years, she had longed to hear him say something that gentle. Tund placed the bowl on the small wooden table, then turned and wrapped his arms around his mother. Not the desperate embrace from the day before, but the steady, grounded embrace of a son who had finally grown up. I'm staying here for a while, he whispered. I want to take care of you. Her hands trembled as she held his back, tears sliding down her wrinkled cheeks. You can stay as long as you want, she murmured. This house will always be yours. Word spread quickly through the village. They saw Tund following his mother to the market like he used to. They saw him fixing the roof, replacing the broken tin sheets. They saw him sitting by his father's grave for an entire afternoon, silent and humbled. No one mentioned the slap. No one whispered gossip. They understood that sometimes, for a man to truly grow, life must break him first. And strangely, that breaking is often the beginning of something new. One evening, as the sun leaned toward the mango branches, Tund stood in the yard holding the letter one last time. He whispered into the wind, as if speaking to his father, as if speaking to himself. The city taught me how to succeed. But you and Mama taught me how to be a man. He looked at the old house, at his mother's thin hands picking vegetables on the porch, at the sky glowing with the last light of day. And in that moment, he understood. Success isn't measured in contracts, titles, or luxury apartments. Real success is when a person knows how to bow their head before family, knows how to admit their faults, and knows how to love the right way. That is when the heart becomes truly rich. Tund folded the letter gently, as if holding a piece of his father's soul. He placed it inside an old wooden box, the box his father once used to store his most precious things. Then he set the box on a shelf where the morning sunlight would always touch it. A daily reminder. Be kind. Love before it's too late. Become the man your parents believed you could be. That evening, as Tund and his mother sat beneath the mango tree, a breeze stirred her silver hair. He smiled softly and said, I ran far, Mama. But the place I needed to return to was here all along. His mother smiled, a smile that could erase a lifetime of mistakes. And as the sun slipped behind the distant hills, casting its last golden blessing over the two of them, it felt like a perfect ending, and also a new beginning.